Now, in order to download the database, you will need a compatible transfer drive.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Deltabase, the show where I sit down and chat with other Transformers creators and discuss their personal journey with the franchise and what they're up to in the creative space. Today we're speaking with a true cyber historian, the man who paved the way for many other creators, myself included, with his excellent video essays. Welcome to the show, Road Rustle.
Hello. That's a lot of it's a hefty introduction. Yeah.
And I was able to get through it the first time. At this point, most of the introduction is the same each episode. There's just a little bit of changes on the end to make sure that they match the host. Well, Russell, again, thank you so much for hopping on this show. You've had a pretty long tenure here on YouTube with videos dating back to about 6 years ago that at least I can access when I do my research. Way back in the day when you went by Markscaper with videos covering different aspects of Transformers as well as other franchises. One of the videos that you released earlier on in your channel life that kind of did really big numbers was your video on Transformers Animated being kind of this reboot of the franchise of Transformers. When you first released that video, what was it like watching it kind of take flight and blowing up?
That was a video that I don't really know. It was a weird making of process there. It kind of was irregular in how I saw it, how I perceived it, you know, uh, growing in viewership. But honestly, that was like one of the first videos where I felt like I was just, I was just, it was just one of those projects where you're just trying to like make it feel right. And if it, whatever it does, however it does, it just does. But it's like, I like that thing, I like how it was put together, at least that, maybe I could look back on it and nitpick, but at least right now, at least at the time, I was like, this is pretty much as good as I can do right now. So, yeah.
So did did that video kind of become almost maybe the template or the building blocks moving forward after that as to how videos were going to be made on your channel?
It was definitely it was definitely one of those videos that I learned a lot from. I think really the first time I saw a video grow that quickly were some of the previous videos I've done, but those videos I didn't learn as much from it as I did here because but honestly, I think that was a culmination. The animated video was a culmination of what I was learning from the Energon video and the Cybertron video before it. So the Energon video, which is titled Transformers Energon Wasn't That Bad, that one was like, okay, I do have, like, I'm just thinking about, I've had this idea for an Energon video for such a long time, and I eventually was able to, like, find a way to put things together in such a way that it, that video also was like one where I was like, okay, this feels good when I've put it out.
Well, no, that video itself is such a great, the animated video is such a great, again, kind of look at why animated is the perfect reboot of Transformers, especially as we see Transformers. I say it's rebooted, quite often. Kind of new iterations are brought forth.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's a help or a hindrance to the franchise itself? The fact that it's kind of every few years kind of restarted.
I think it's one of those things that is a bit of a double-edged sword because on one hand, reinvention is really helpful to keep the story timeless. The fact that it can be rebooted over and over again makes it a little bit more uh, I guess, it can endure, the changes over time,
Hmm.
and you see this with other other franchises at the time that Transformers was coming out, right? Like how they've had to adapt and change. Transformers has been more or less, I wouldn't say consistent, but it definitely feels more like a sine wave. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It
Yeah.
it kind of move. It kind of keeps a distinct pattern. So on that front, that's a positive. On the other side of it, because it reboots so often, it feels almost like like you can't really sink your teeth into any one world, and there are some really long running franchises where that has been a huge benefit, that it has this sort of uh passing from one generation to another. And I think that is all on top of that, I feel personally that that might be due to maybe some hesitance to go with someone else as like the main leader. But actually, no, I don't know if I agree with what I just said there, because they did try it with from Prime to Rid, and they are
Hmm.
that kind of was, so they've done that before. I think that there is, I don't know. I think that I hope that there is a confidence in the future to kind of have a much longer running series, because I think like
Hmm.
animated, for example, having multiple different um, eras of like leaders and things like that. That show was made for it, and I think you could do that with Prime as well. Um, I think that in Prime technically you also have the War and Fall of Cybertron games before it. So that one, it could feel like, okay, we've had this era, now we're going to move into, I don't know, the Rodimus era, or whoever would be the next one in
Right.
line in your version. And I think that's something I am hoping for. I think that would be something interesting to see in the future.
You bring up some fantastic points here. The double-edged sword nature of having this kind of long running continuity, and you talked about Transformers Prime as well as the Cybertron games, which all kind of somehow coexist within the aligned continuity. You and I and many people will know by now that the aligned continuity didn't really quite work out, maybe perhaps how it was originally intended. What do you think, just from the information that we know as fans, and just in your own opinion, what do you think kind of was the big stumbling block of the aligned continuity just not fitting together maybe as well as it should have?
I think I think it might have been towards the end of Prime is kind of where I feel like you start to see some things, unravel a bit. I don't know about it from a production side. I'm just thinking about it
Mhm.
from a just
Yeah.
like watching it, seeing it, like, this doesn't feel like a cohesive universe as much. Because there are ways that the Cybertron games and Prime, they don't connect as well as they could have. But I feel like that is explainable in the way that long running franchises are. They have to explain, paper over some of these, potholes, I guess. I don't know what metaphor that is, but you know what I
Mhm.
mean, right? They
Yeah.
have to sort of bridge some of these pieces that don't always finally connect. And if you're just watching these things, you have really, I've had very little issue with like the quality of those things. I think that when the quality started to dip a little bit with Rid 2015, not necessarily because it was aimed at a younger audience, or you know that it was trying to bring Bumblebee to the forefront, but
Mhm.
that it just felt like that show, I don't know what it is, that show like for me felt like it had a really solid premise, and then I feel like it didn't know what to do with it. And then
Mhm.
you had Rescue Bots on the side, which kind of was, even through Cyberverse. I don't know if that show and Rescue Bots Academy are like technically still in the line. I mean, I know what
Hmm.
Rescue Bots is, but I don't know about Academy. So like you have this sort of like you see there, right, where it's like unraveling,
Right.
and it's not
It's hard to
connecting to each
tell.
other. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of the point I would say that things started to unravel. Yeah.
Do you think that RID 2015 maybe suffered extra criticism because it was in the shadow of Transformers Prime?
It both benefits and uh I don't it both benefits and is hurt by the fact that it is a sequel to Prime,
Hmm.
because if you're watching it and you watch Transformers Prime, there's stuff in there that's like, oh, that's cool that they're continuing the story, but then it's frustrating if you're a fan of
Right.
Transformers Prime as a continuation. And then on the other side of it, if you're watching it as its own thing, I don't know what else there truly is to glom onto. Again, maybe somebody really likes it. I don't want to take that away from them, but I just
Yeah.
feel like it just doesn't. It for me, I don't see how RID 2015 as its own thing. I don't know how it fares. But I mean, I don't have
Hmm.
that like perspective of watching this show as somebody who hasn't seen Prime. Like I grew up with Prime, so and this
Yeah.
was like this came out when I was in high school. So I was like watching this, and I was just like, oh, okay, I guess I'm done with Transformers. This does, that's
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah. Not
that's
not
what I
not its
felt.
greatest outing. Not
Yeah.
not the greatest point.
Yeah, and then
One
you
of
had
the
Combiner Wars at the time, I think,
Ooh.
too.
It's funny. It's so funny that you mentioned Combiner Wars. I so often forget that trilogy. I just it always escapes my mind because when people talk about, oh, what Transformer show do you really not like? And you go, well, I wouldn't say I hate RID 2015. There's just a lot of things I don't like about it. There's
Yeah.
some things about the War for Cybertron trilogy I'm not the hugest fan of, and I completely always forget about about the Prime Wars trilogy. Even when you said it, I had to think to myself, wait, which one was that again?
I mean, it was such a meme at the time. So like
Yeah.
that's what I mainly remember it for, with the like, whatever the hell they were doing with Starscream there.
Ugh.
Um
Yeah.
is that but like you had those two. You had Devastation at that time as well. So that was like the only thing that's like, okay, I'm still listening, but you're on thin ice, Transformers
Hmm.
franchise,
Yeah. A
So,
double-edged sword, like you said. It gets
oh, and
to
then you had the
reinvent
last night
itself, but
after. Yeah.
ooh, you're right. That was all in a row. That was a tough time period. That
Yeah.
was, man. Well, thinking on maybe happier times within the community. Your your video literally called a video about the Cybertron games. I
Mhm.
think it is an absolute masterpiece and a monument within the
Thank you.
Transformers community. It's a huge video. It's almost 3 hours long. Um, your most successful video on the channel, to my recollection. What was it like putting that that project together and building it?
That was okay. So I kind of just went. I don't know. Like I just didn't talk to anyone online
Hmm.
for the whole time I was making it. I was like just in real life, just dealing with stuff, and I was
Hmm.
just most like I started the video and I was like, okay, what do I do? I don't know. How do you put something like this together? And so the first part is a little funny. So I recorded all the footage, and then I was like, okay, and then it got corrupted, and then I
Oh
was like,
no.
okay, okay, yeah, I got the footage. I was like, okay, played the game. And then I don't know what happened. Something happened, and the foot because it just wouldn't work. And then like I decided, okay, it's time to, I got to do this again. Deleted it, re-recorded all of it. And that one took quite a bit of work. Just kind of, I think one of the things I learned from that, and going back to what you were saying about what are like things that you learned about the animated video. In the
Hmm.
animated video, what I did a lot of is this sort of, I don't know, montage type of thing, right? Where I would like
Hmm.
show like, instead of having a long paragraph describing stuff, I would be like, okay, I need to set the mood in a sense, right? So I did a lot of that. And so what, like that video, the first thing I did was I put together one of the intro bits, right, where Steve Bloom is the narrator, he's talking.
Hmm.
I put in all the little cuts between it, and then I think it was for chapter 9 or 10 of the Autobots campaign. So it'd be like on the Autobots campaign for War for Cybertron. And I
Hmm.
did that. I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of the vibe, right? Really just making the viewer feel like I feel how I feel about these games,
Right.
not just through what my words, but also through like presentation. And I think that was the big thing. And so that kept me going. I will say this, it is an undertaking. It is a massive undertaking because the thing is, it's not hard to make like necessarily a 3 hour video in and of itself. It is hard to make the way a video where, and I think you know this, it's like when you're editing one line at a time, putting
Hmm.
the footage, each
Yeah.
piece together. That's the hard part. That's a tedious part. I don't want to say hard, but like
Hmm.
it's it's time consuming,
Yeah. You have to
right?
listen to yourself
Like
too,
you, yeah.
which can be tough.
So yeah, and then you're like, ah, man, the line doesn't sound good. Okay, gotta go re-record it.
Yep.
So that's the part that's a little bit tedious. Um, and you kind of have to. It's an endurance test, in a sense of like committing to a project like that. And because you could be like, because I wasn't sharing anything with anyone during that period. I could have just said, maybe I don't want to do it, and just drop it. And but I decided that, but I think that when I made that, those little segments like that, right, the introing to each chapter, and all that stuff, I was like, I liked watching that, and so
Hmm.
that made it a lot easier for me to bear some of the tedium of like, okay, gotta. Okay, line like because like I don't know if you've ever had this where you're like, okay, I've done so much work, you've done a minute, like
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'll scroll
It's
over to see the rest of my timeline, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I have so much more to do, and I don't want to do it.
yeah, I'm like, oh
I
my
want to say
god.
these things, but I don't want to do the work. I just want my ideas to be downloaded into my viewers' heads.
Yeah, it's just kind of like, man, I thought this would be. It's like because sometimes you also have that like you have that moment of yeah, no, I could get through this in about, I can edit a video in about a couple hours, and then
Hmm.
go to bed on time. And
Nope.
then you're like, it's 3 a.m. and
Yeah.
you're like, okay, I've minute 5 out
Yeah.
of like 20. And it's like,
It,
it's
and it just
like, yeah,
keeps going and going, and you're like, oh. And then, like you said, you maybe hear a line, and you're like, I need to redo that line. I need to go.
yeah.
I need to go back and re-record that. And
Yeah. And
I think what's funny is technically you don't, but we do it to ourselves to say, no, I need to do this. I need to make it better.
yeah, and then and then the other thing, this is something I remember hearing from Diamond Bolt, which was that like
Hmm.
sometimes he would say something. I think he said it in like a live stream, but he said something to the effect like sometimes you do have to take a break because sometimes you just don't know how to edit a part. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, and that's something that's another lesson I've been sort of learning is like because sometimes you just write like your your narration out, and then you realize that some of the sentences you say are not conducive to video, or it's
Mm-hmm.
like to editing, and you kind of just are playing playing footage, but it's like it something that sometimes when you're reading it like an essay, it's not the same thing as recording a narration in a video,
Yeah.
and you kind of have to. That's something I've hopefully gotten better at, and that's something I try to keep continuing to get better at, which is recognizing the difference between those two things. There are challenges, and but eventually when it was done, there was a euphoria of like, okay, that this thing is out, and
Mm-hmm.
whatever this is, and going through the nightmare of rendering a 3 hour
Mm-hmm.
video, checking for all the errors, rendering it again,
Yeah.
checking for errors, rendering it again, and like that video. The one regret I have is that because of the time it takes to get to render all that stuff and check everything and try to make sure things are as good as they are. I wanted that to be out by September 17th, right? Like, which is the
Mm-hmm.
Transformers, day, or whatever, G1 air date or whatever it is. And when it did air, or like when it did like premiere, it was like it was like I think it was a few days later, and I was like, I wish it was like that would have been so like that would have been like all lined up correctly. But sometimes life just
Yeah.
happens, right? And it's like this isn't my full-time thing, so or like that wasn't my full-time thing in the sense of like I had other responsibilities, and so like you have to balance all that as well, and so you're trying to deal with all that.
Yeah. What was it like when the obviously you talked about the that kind of feeling of relief when the video was out. What was it like to see it, just blow up and rise kind of to the top and become such a huge video for viewers?
um um it's been like that video is a bit of a slow, like it kind of is almost, it's one of the most evergreen sort of videos I've made, where
Mm-hmm.
it continuously does well. And it's people still like it. I still get some people like, oh man, I'm discovering this video in 2025.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those things where I thought that I didn't know how well, you don't ever know how well a video would do,
Right.
but you kind of get to the end, you kind of get to seeing like, oh, it's gotten, it passed 100, and it's like, wow, that's a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and then, that was like it was a good feeling, I guess is all I could say, right? It was just a good
Yeah.
feeling to see that all the, like, it's good to see hard work paying
Pay
off,
off.
so what I mean,
Mm-hmm.
like all that time, that was spent on it. It wasn't like, it wasn't something that just kind of, you know, blew in the wind. It was just like, okay, people like this, right, right,
Yeah.
and that's like, a great feeling to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've talked to other creators here on the show. Obviously, I think at most creators' hearts, we create because we have something to say or because we have that creative fix to get something out. And so a lot of the times for many people, when they create, especially on YouTube, the video is kind of almost for themselves. They're making it for themselves. But it is always nice when an audience reacts to something positively because it's nice
Yeah.
to have that dialogue, and there's no denying that warm feeling you get when you're like, oh man, this video did really well and people really enjoy my work on it.
Yeah, I mean that there's a whole conversation about like, because of like trying to, you know, uh, of like whether you make videos for people or for yourself, and
Hmm.
like, is it because, is it just because you want this thing to exist, um, or is it because you want other people to see? It's like sometimes, I think that some of the videos that I liked making are the ones where it's like this. I feel I want, like I don't see this anywhere. I don't see this type of video anywhere. I want this video to exist, so I'm gonna do it. Like that's
Yeah.
kind of an impulse that, you know,
Yeah,
you
you're
can have.
fulfilling a need. We've been talking about this video, but also in concurrence with the video, the Cybertron games, which hold a very special place in my heart as well as I know they do with you. What what do you think is needed most in the video game space for Transformers? Is it another AAA game, or is it something maybe a little bit smaller and, kind of I'll say cheaper on the end of production?
When you asked that question, my instant response is like you asked, what does the Transformers video game scene need? And I was like, a video game, like, just like,
I mean, that's
I
the
mean,
answer. That is the answer. Yeah.
yeah, there is no, like, I don't know, I don't play Galactic Trials. I'm not playing these
Yeah.
other like, I don't know if you call them shovelware, but like whatever they are, like I think you either do like I feel like you kind of have to go in both the either you have this like big like AAA style, and I mean like a proper like AAA treatment of a
Mhm.
game, right?
Yeah.
Like not with all the nonsense that can come with it, but what I mean, right? Like another war, another fall,
Yeah. A
that I think is
2010 era
needed.
AAA.
Yeah, like that type of game where even if it's like even if you can only play as like three characters or something,
Yeah.
like or like five characters or whatever, it's like a fun story, it's an experience, it's made like with some vision. And on the other end of it, I mean, I guess it's on both ends that you want a game with vision, right?
Yeah.
Like something that doesn't feel like it's just out there. So I think that this is something I've been well, I would like to see like games like a sort of Shredder's Revenge treatment
Yes.
um for Transformers. I'm not necessarily saying like Shredder's Revenge itself, but like you know what I mean, or like
Yeah.
Sonic Mania, like where it's like we're also going to do these small scale games where they're you know
Kind of
they're
that
not
double A
at
space almost.
yeah, I do. I mean, I think that double A, indie games probably are, I think that there are plenty of things you can do with Transformers there. Um, I don't know. I think that you have to be a bit. I think that they need to. Well, I mean, they need to make like a proper game. Like that's just the answer,
It's kind of hard. It
Yeah.
seems like, which I mean, within the video game space, it seems hard for everybody, but especially for Transformers, it seems like it's just not happening. Yeah, which is a shame. But moving out of the video game sphere, you've recently on your channel been covering the Skybound comics, and as a channel myself that primarily focuses on that continuity, what do you think this story is doing that's been capturing so many people's attention?
I think it's earnest. I think
Mm.
that's really what it is. It's like it feels earnest and accessible. I think that you read issue one and it's from there to where we are right now. Um, I think that you can just pick it up, read the book, like all the way to the end, or up till the current point,
Mhm.
and it's just a cohesive story. So it's like it's a bit refreshing in that sense. It's like okay, I just have to follow this one thing to follow this one story. There's other Void Rivals and other things out there, but I
Mhm.
don't need them uh
Right.
as much as maybe something like IDW where you're like jumping between different series all the time is super confusing sometimes.
Yes.
This is like it's accessible in that sense. It's like you just and simple in how you read the comic. And then on top of that, um you need to have uh I mean on top of that, they so Daniel Warren Johnson, he's writing a very, I feel it is an earnest story. It feels like he cares about these characters. He wants to
Hmm.
try some interesting things with them. He wants to bring take some elements of these characters and, really put them to the forefront. I don't know. I think that that's what makes it so. I mean, I don't know how well it's doing in terms of sales right now, but I remember like the first issue sold like hotcakes or something, right?
It's
So
it's still selling. I think it's on its 12th reprint, so it's doing
yeah,
very well. And I
yeah.
know
So
my local comic book store, you can no longer buy volume 1 or 2 because they're sold out because they sell
yeah,
so quickly.
yeah. I think it's those two things. It's and especially where again, I think that and it's not just IDW. It's like it's also Marvel and DC Comics can have that like you're jumping between different things, or there's so many different things,
Hmm.
continuity and everything. This is in some ways very refreshing. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
My phone just like kind of
You're good.
rang a bit, so I'll just say what I say. It's sort of refreshing, in the sense that you don't have this constant need to jump around. You can follow it, and it's well written. It's got really good art. It's really doing a lot of cool stuff with you know. I think what strikes me the most is how well they're doing the like Transformers, like using the fact that they're robots to their full advantage, right? And I
Hmm.
mean, I don't know if there's a spoiler for issue 6 is or
No, you're
like it,
good.
yeah. So yeah, for like when Optimus rips off his arm, right? Like stuff like that is they're
Hmm.
really taking advantage of the fact that they're robots. So I thought that they did a really good job with. I think they are doing a really good job. It's not to say it's without fault. It's not to say
Hmm.
that there aren't maybe any issues in terms of pacing or whatever somebody wants to say, right? I think that there are many of criticisms that I would agree with as well. But I think on the whole, they're doing a really good job,
Yeah.
and I think that's why it's doing so well.
I think it really, I agree with you. I think it really has the success, um, in part, obviously, from Daniel Warren Johnson. He's always said that his comics have to have heart. And like you said, it's earnest. I think you can kind of feel that through the storytelling, that it's got heart, and yet at the same time, it knows when to just kind of be silly, goofy robots doing wrestling moves on top of each other. I think
Yeah.
it's a good balance, which I know many people dislike because they want something much more serious. And I think again, kind of like with that double-edged sword we were talking about, you can have both. There's good and bad for having either or.
I feel like the seriousness. I've seen people have different reactions to how like it can be very very gritty, and some people
Hmm.
don't like that. But then there's also people who don't like some of the other like silliness, like bringing some of the '80s stuff in here. So
Yeah.
I've seen different uh, opinions back and forth, but I think on the whole, I think that I read this comic and I go, they did a really good job at telling a Transformers story. And this feels almost like a reboot of the Marvel comics in many ways, where
Hmm.
there are where it's like, okay, those comics, it's not like they were thinking everything through issue to issue, or like arc to arc, you know what I mean, right?
Hmm.
It like that was they were just starting out based on everything I've read and heard about, like from Bob Budiansky and others, like, hey, we're just okay, let's try this out, let's try that out,
Right.
okay.
Let's throw
you
something
know
at the wall and see what sticks.
yeah, that's what it appears. At least that's how I feel about it. Um, Even if it may not be, like, maybe they did have a plan. I don't know. But
Yeah.
this feels like they took that comic and then they're like, okay, let's let's like iron out some of the wrinkles and bring some more modern elements and a new twist, and bring a little bit more fun, right? Like it's almost like I feel like there's elements of it that's like almost like a draft two, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's a wonderful. I've never thought of putting it that way. That's wonderful.
I read some of this, stuff like Sparky being being a military guy and stuff like that. It's like
Hmm.
that is straight up from the original like miniseries we like for Marvel. And I'm like seeing, and again, I don't know the full behind the scenes, so maybe I'm wrong about something, but I feel like there is a like it feels like they are taking the story seriously, and the art is really good. Like it's just really good art from issue
Hmm.
to issue. It's some of the best comic art for at least for Transformers I've ever seen, where and I always like, the kind of gritty like art style that both Daniel Warren Johnson and it's Jorge Corona. I haven't seen. And then I don't know if of the other who did the. I think they did a Starscream issue and issue
Yes. Yeah.
13.
Yeah. Issue
And
13 and 14, and then 19, which recently released, have guest artists. Yeah.
yeah, so yeah, no, the art is really good, and I mean that's probably like one of the most important things in some ways, right? Like it just looks good, and it's just I'm reading it, and it's like this looks super detailed, but it feels, and I think something about the way that it isn't, because like it doesn't feel, I don't know what the word would be, like refined, right? It doesn't feel like refined art, and it adds a human touch. Yeah, it adds a human touch to it, and like as if someone is like literally they're just drawing Transformers how they want to. Obviously, that's the process is far more like there's colorists, there's all these other
There's many
people.
hands, but it feels more
Yeah,
personal. You're right.
yeah.
Yeah. Are you reading the series just straight through the volumes?
I am keeping up with it issue to issue.
Oh, okay.
Um, so I do. So I am caught up, but I am caught up for the most part. Aside from other stuff, here and there, but like, uh, and I do want to do like talk about volume three, soon, or at least each, some of these issues in volume three.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm going by like whatever the volume says it is.
Yes. Yeah. Do you think, and this is just kind of a question, even just for myself, do you think the best way to enjoy the series is to read it volume by volume or to read it issue by issue?
I think that I would say first two volumes are better as volumes, and
Hmm.
then I mean, volume three, right? So 13 to 18. That one, I mean, I don't know. I feel
Bit
like in
harder.
that case, it's a little bit more segmented.
Yeah.
And that's sort of one of the issues I've been having is like sometimes it's that issue 13 and 14 kind of feel like one thing, and then it kind of feels like
Hmm.
it goes into another. It feels less like multiple parts of a single arc and more like this is a series of events that's leading up to where we are now. So,
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's something that I've mentioned to some other people as well, especially if you've read Daniel Warren Johnson's other comic books. I feel like a lot of his storytelling benefits from having the full volume available to you. I mean, I love, of course, reading issue by issue, and it's still kind of how it's meant to be read. But I definitely feel like you said, it's kind of obvious that volumes 1 and 2 are sort of kind of, I feel like, are meant to be read in totality together. I think they just flow a little bit better. What has been your favorite moment from, we can even just say the first two volumes of Skybound. Well, or we could say all of Skybound. Why not? What has been your favorite kind of key moment from that storyline, from that continuity?
I think I would have to say it's when Optimus is talking to Sparky, um, and he says something to the effect of "Humans are small but mighty." I think that
Hmm.
that's my favorite moment. Um, it's hard to say what's a favorite moment. I think because there's a lot of times where I'm like, this is a piece of a larger puzzle. So it's like, it's like taking one puzzle piece and choosing like one puzzle piece out of a myriad of puzzle
Right.
pieces, right? But I do think the moment with Optimus and Sparky is my favorite.
Yeah. I always point towards that moment in particular when people mention to me that they tried reading the the series and it's too dark and there's nothing good about it. Like nothing uplifting or nothing other than just this constant darkness. And I think you really got to get to this section because it's got so much heart to it, so much humanity that Daniel Warren Johnson has been able to put into the page, just to kind of show these two characters who are both, struggling with war.
Yeah, no, I think that it's part of the fact that it's so gruesome and like so much happens in it. I get why that might turn someone off, but
Mhm.
I think that at the end of the day, but as a whole, I think the story is using that. I mean, it's light our darkest hour, right? Like
Right. It's in
it's
service.
yeah. So it's like you do have to have a darkest hour, you know. So
Right. Yeah. It's not just there to be dark. There obviously is an end game in mind for why things are going the way they are. Except for poor Jetfire. I think Daniel Warren Johnson's just being mean to him. I mean, he did recently say that he has not forgotten about him, but man, it seems like he's just beating on that guy.
I don't even know like what's happened to. I just assume that he's just like gone. Like he's just
I I think we
in the
all kind of
corner.
assume that, and then in a recent letter section, I think from it might have been from 19. Somebody asked if somebody asked Daniel Warren Johnson if he had forgotten about Jetfire, and he's like, "Nope, I haven't forgot about him. Don't worry." People are like,
Mhm.
"Okay, all right." And, everybody's got their favorite, and I totally get that. And they want their favorite to come back. Uh, I totally get. I have my favorites too. That when I see them on the page, I'm like, "Please, just focus on them." But I understand there's a main story that we got to stick with. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Road Russell, I want to thank you again for coming on the show. Before we finish up, I always do a lightning round of questions. So it's just 3 quick questions that I ask the guest to just blurt out the first thing that comes to their mind when I ask the question. You ready?
All right.
Fall of Cybertron sequel or Transformers Prime Season 4? Only pick one.
If Fall of Cybertron sequel.
Ah, that's the correct answer. Do you think Megatron and Optimus could ever return to their brotherly relationship after the war?
No.
Of your entire catalog of videos, what's one video on your channel that you wish had just a little more attention?
I think I wished I took a little bit more time. Maybe I wished I took a little bit more time with the devastation video.
Mm.
So yeah.
Just more time to finalize it or curate it or
I think it's more just, I mean, a little bit more time in the sense that there are some parts of it that I wish I like went back and kind of just changed a bit here, changed a bit there. There are parts where I did cut, like, a few corners and just put it, something. That's the video I kind of want to like, maybe I should like try and give that another go, an
Mhm.
update. So I don't know, but that's the first thing that comes to mind.
I definitely think I devastation is, at least in my mind, is a topic that sadly I have very little knowledge on. I did not play it when it was legally available. Even just for me, just between the two of us, that's, a topic that I think definitely needs more attention brought towards it, that game. Not that it's forgotten, but it definitely needs more eyes on it for what it did, especially at a time where maybe Transformers wasn't quite at its top game. Well, Russell, thank you again for hopping on the show. This is the section where I always ask creators if they have something they want to plug, whether it's just their channel or a project they're working on. I know you're working on a video game, if I recall correctly. Now is the time that you can plug your work and say, hey, please go check out my stuff.
Yeah, for right now, like you can check out like Road Rustle on YouTube. That the game is, just a thing I'm trying to, experiment with and stuff like that and see what works and what not, what else. Um, but I think, the focus right now is, or not the focus, but like a lot. But if you want to see what I've done, it's on Road Rustle. So that's like kind of the main thing I got going on right now.
Awesome. Any sneak previews that I can get out of you for what's coming up for the channel?
No.
That's totally fine. 100% fine. That is
Yeah.
that is a good and correct answer. You don't owe me anything.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Road Russell, for being on the show. It's been a wonderful time.
Yeah, no problem. It's great to be here.
And thank you, everybody, for catching another episode of Deltabase. We'll be back yet again, as per usual, next month with another creator who's been talking about Transformers for a very long time. I'll see you on the next video. Bye.